For 3 years, my senior year at Montebello High School, my first 2 years at Los Angeles City College, I did the same thing over the winter break. I sold women's shoes at Lee's Shoe Store, located at the corner of 6th and Broadway in downtown Los Angeles. I was terrible at it. I mumbled at the customers. I didn't know what to say about a woman's shoe. I didn't know the difference between a flat and a high heel. I knew nothing. I would have been fired a long time ago, but the manager, Mr. Needleman, needed as many able-bodied people as he could get during the holiday rush. Now, in those days, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, downtown was the place to shop. All the major department stores were there. Robinson's, Bullock's, Broadway. Places like Lee's Shoe Store served a kind of lower middle class clientele. And the way the hierarchy worked is they actually had professional shoe salesmen who got first crack at the customers, then the part-time help, and then finally me. Mr. Needleman never put a customer in my station on purpose. So I was a bit wary when one day he said, "I have a customer in your station." So I went, and there was this really nice-looking, tall, lanky lady sitting at my station. I smiled at her. She smiled at me. And then I realized this was no lady. I looked over at Mr. Needleman, and he was just chuckling away with the assistant manager. Finally, he told me that I am looking for a white satin pump size 10 AA with a combination last. I have such a terrible time finding shoes in my size. Well, the chuckling of Mr. Needleman kind of subsided, but he was impressed when my customer left with 6 pairs of shoes in size 10 AA with a combination last. As he said, I have such a hard time finding shoes in my size. Now, during those days, everyone got a half-hour lunch, and I did the same thing at lunchtime. I walked up to Hill Street to Wallach's Music City. Now, at Wallach's, you could check records out before you bought them and actually sit in a little controlled booth and play them. Well, I found this for Stan Kenton record, City of Glass, and I played the whole thing. Unfortunately, it ran about 32 minutes, so I was late getting back. I thought Mr. Needleman would can me on the spot, but instead, he just smiled at me and said, "I've placed a customer in your station." I walked over there, and what I saw was probably the most beautiful young woman I had seen in my 18 years on earth. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "My older brother Leonard came, and he said you were so sweet that I should ask for you." Sweet, that's me. It turns out her name was Rhonda, and Leonard was her older brother, was a female impressionist, and they were playing at a club, the Purple Onion, in Hollywood. It turns out that Rhonda and Leonard did a circuit of these clubs throughout the United States. She said if I wanted to come, she would put me on the guest list, and I would be her treat. I was there. Now, the Purple Onion was a different kind of experience for me. I looked around. I could not find a woman. The place was packed with men. Rhonda spotted me, motioned for me to come and sit at the table closest to the piano. Well, I didn't get half of what Leonard was doing up there, but I've never laughed so much in my life. He also had a guest with him, a young comedian named Charles Pierce, and they did impressions of Tallulah Bankhead and Betty Davis trying to be civil with each other at a cocktail party and failing miserably, all the while Rhonda would be playing A Pretty Girl Is Like a Melody. As much as I was enjoying the entertainment, I had to admit Rhonda was one hell of a musician. She did this beautiful right-hand tremolos with each turn in the action. At intermission, she came and sat with me. Leonard, her older brother, came, squeezed my shoulder and said, "Great shoes," and wandered off. So Rhonda and I talked. Before she had to go back, she said, "I would invite you to the hotel, but Leonard is having guests over, and I think he's taking over my room and his room. I'd go to your apartment, but I'm guessing you still live with your parents. She was right. Tell you what, on Christmas Eve, we're doing a special show called Santa and His Dear Little Elves. You're invited. You're my guest. And afterwards, you can come back to my place and open a present. Now, I was a raging virgin at 18 years old. I didn't sleep the night before Christmas Eve, which was 3 days from then. But when I arrived at the Purple Onion, about a half hour early, the doors were locked. Finally, the bartender came in and said, "There's no show tonight." Leonard was beaten up by the police. He's at Queen of Angels Hospital. It seems at that time, Police Chief Parker, who hated queers, had installed pairs of patrolmen to roam the streets up and down Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard. And homosexuals, men could not walk down the street holding hands. They would be arrested. There were all sorts of curfews. It seems that Leonard came out of the club wearing high heels. When he was confronted by the policeman about why he was wearing high heels, he did not give a satisfactory answer. I got to Queen of Angels Hospital in about 20 minutes and found Rhonda sitting by Leonard's bedside. He had 3 cracked ribs, a broken arm. I asked Rhonda if there's anything I could do, any way I could help. She just sort of held her hand up and said, "Please, please just go away." I went home that night and played my City of Glass album all night.